This is the Neurosurgery Podcast.
Cheers.
Cheers to lust
Yes, lust.
and self-control. Yes, so we just talked about gluttony and temperance, and we broke out the wine for that. And so gluttony, we kind of characterized as the pleasurable feeling that you get from something. That is the motivating factor. To me, lust, the phrase I wrote down for this is, I want that more than anything, right? And it's that desire, and not just wanting something, but a pathological level of desire that you're willing to throw everything away to get that thing.
Like a buck in heat.
Like a buck in heat, exactly. And so the most obvious and the simplest place to start will be sexual desire, right? And the way that we channel that in maintaining a marriage, which you constantly talk about, maintaining a family through our difficult lives with the difficult jobs that we have that take so much work. But I think 9 times out of 10, when someone asks you, Dr. Wang, how do I do X? How do you manage Y? How do you keep your life together? The first thing you say is, Amy.
Amy. So, my wife, I'm so blessed to have her with me. And it's funny because it's hard to be with a neurosurgeon,
Yeah,
right? Like all the time.
it's hard to be with myself.
Right. So, I think sometimes our spouses are jealous of neurosurgery itself. Is the lust for neurosurgery? And I think having that understanding is fundamental. But we're human, so the natural desire is to be with another person, right? Whatever your proclivity might be. And having that partnership is important. But lust is something that, by almost definition, is ephemeral, right? It's time limited.
Yeah,
It doesn't go on forever.
right.
And I don't know why that is. I mean, I wonder if it's just unsustainable or if it's not intended to be that way.
Yeah, and I think that's why that corresponding virtue is self-control, because like so many of these things that are drives or motivations or temptations, they really are for a moment, as you say. It's almost like a feeling, or like a wave of nausea that comes over you, a wave of lust overcomes you. And if you can control that impulse, maybe that's the word, that impulse, then you can maintain the structure that you've devised for your life over time, instead of succumbing to that desire that, again, possesses you such that you think, I would throw it all away for X, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think that most people listening to this are not going to be able to truly relate to what it's like to be a lustful person. It's just not part of what we do. But understanding that element of human nature is not unimportant, because the behavior for the lust piece, as opposed to many of the others, is irrational. There's an irrationality to it, right? Like, why the fuck would you do that?
Yeah.
And we do see that. When you see an occurrence like, why did that person do that? It's like, oh my God, they were totally off their bearings,
Yeah.
right? Which is hard for us to accept.
Right. None of us wants to think that we are animals governed by drives,
Right.
reacting or automatically pursuing something like a dog after a frisbee. We want to think that we have free will, that
Right.
we're rational actors. And I don't think the existence of drives like lust, or these states that overcome us, I don't think that supersedes or negates the existence of our agency. It's like saying gravity means there is no free will because you can't jump as high as you want, right? It's a state condition in which we make decisions. And I was thinking about, again, the simplest everyday way that we think about lust is sexual. And again, to my studies in preparation for this, Freud, again, in the same book, Civilization and Its Discontents, he wrote, the person in love, against all the evidence of our senses, the person in love asserts that I and you are one and the same, right? And we feel that way about things that we love, that we want to possess, and that we become possessed by in turn. And so it's easy to feel this oneness in a healthy way, and this connection with the spouse, with children, with a family. But I think that many of us, the type of person who is drawn to neurosurgery, can feel a lust for the job as well.
Yeah.
A lust to be a neurosurgeon and to be in neurosurgery. And again, feel that oneness with your job. And you talk about this a lot, how people talk about your work-life balance stuff, right?
Yeah.
Where you found this way to unite the two, and instead of this work-life balance, you just are who you are. And Mike Wang, the neurosurgeon, is Mike Wang, the husband, it's just Mike Wang, that's who you are. And you seem to have done this and sublimated that part of your life in a really healthy way, but we all see people who are consumed by neurosurgery, and instead of incorporating it into their lives, or perhaps incorporating your life into this larger community you're a part of, they kind of wither away and they fade into it and are consumed by it.
Yeah, I don't know that I've survived those challenges. Like, for the people out there, like, well, I'm trying to struggle with this work-life balance, right? The reality is that nobody gets to replay these timelines.
Yeah.
So you don't know what the alternate outcomes would be. So then, in the process of trying to rethink, did I make the right or wrong choice to make the better next choice, you have very little guidance. And it almost gives you the reasoning behind lust as an instinct. Like, the lust as an instinct is to say, look, I'm committed. So like Bonnie and Clyde. I was asking our two boys, I had the chance to spend some time with them. I'm like, what do you think of Bonnie and Clyde? Right? That's the ultimate sort of Romeo and Juliet, Bonnie and Clyde, all this stuff, right? Like,
both toxic, but in very different ways.
Right? The Joker and Harlequin is the modern one, right? But the reality is there are two criminals doing this thing together, but they're in lust or in love or whatever you want to call it, and they're doing this thing because that's what they do. They're not even thinking really about it. Like, I don't think they're sitting there thinking, like, I'm going to kill these people and do these things. It's part of the process by which they're consumed. So,
I will say, you want to talk about work-life balance?
Yeah.
There's hundreds of residents and fellows who have trained under you, and if they're listening right now, they're thinking, yes, there's kids' questions like this too. Because I've been in your OR, and I've seen you across the table. Hey, what do you think about Bonnie and Clyde? Hey, what do you think about Bruce Lee? It's like, so they're probably still there, oh, he does this to his kids
yes,
too. Oh my God.
So unfortunately I don't do it. I probably should have. I'm like so different with my kids, which is probably a huge mistake. I should have been more like the normal me. But I think the reality is that if you're not in lust with neurosurgery, like, should you even be in it? Maybe, right? And by that, it is contemporaneously constrained, meaning if you're a resident and you're not in lust, can you do the hours demanded? Is it rational or irrational? I mean, I would suggest that there's a strong argument to say it's irrational.
Yeah.
I mean, you lived through it recently, so tell us about that.
Well, maybe you have to be in lust with neurosurgery in those junior years. And then as you ascend, part of the maturing process is growing out of that. Or not growing out of your relationship with neurosurgery, but perhaps transitioning from lust to love. Mm-hmm. Because lust can't maintain a relationship for decades in between two people or with a career like that. So maybe part of the maturation and ascendancy within neurosurgery is transitioning that psychotic lust into a mature, sublimated love for the field, and so you have a long-term relationship with it like you do.
So if you were to approach young 22, 24-year-old people and ask them, do you want to do this? And you just laid out the facts in front of them.
Yeah.
It's a, fuck no. That's a retarded strategy, right? Yeah. Retarded meaning this is not a commentary, but like, it's a dumb strategy, right? It's a stupid strategy. But then you fall in lust with it. Yeah. Like, oh my God, somebody let me remove part of a temporal glioma. And this is the only way to go.
Yeah.
Right? You just take the dive.
Yeah, and it almost is like being early in a relationship. Because you talk about the first time I said I love you, or your first kiss,
Yeah.
and things like that. I remember the first vertical I drilled with
Yeah.
Perforator. I remember the first pedicle screw I placed in your operating room. I remember all of these firsts, and it is almost like the early days, the golden days of
Yeah.
a relationship.
I remember putting the first central line in with Steve Chang, first arterial line, first ventriculostomy. And we have residents, this is the downside. They say, I'm not even interested in getting a relationship because I'm married to neurosurgery now. I'm like, whoa, hold on
Yeah.
a second. Like, that's great. Awesome.
Yeah.
Harness that. But not forever.
Yeah,
That's
right.
not going to end well.
Right, because you need to go home to something, right? And I mean, I've been thinking more and more as I'm mentoring and trying to teach residents who are my juniors now, who don't take care of themselves. And this is kind of tangential to what we're talking about, but it's important because the cliche is like you have to take care of yourself to take care of other people. You have to love yourself to love other people, right? But I think at a deeper level, what's the point of what we do at work is to save lives and make lives better. If you don't have a life of your own, what are you even doing, right? Like if
Yeah.
you're going to give 100 hours of your week when you're young to save someone else's life, and then you go home to an empty apartment and a pile of laundry and dirty dishes, and there's no one that you care about who cares about you, there's a mismatch there because you're giving all of your working energy and your youth to making lives better. Then why don't you want that for yourself if it's something you truly value?
Well, I will say this, and I think that there is, I don't want to imprint my philosophy on anybody else's per se, that it's the right way.
Yeah.
It's one model, but I'm thinking about the late, great Julius Goodman. And Julius Goodman, known famously for the Goodman Oral Boards course, which everybody will take,
Yeah.
pretty much. Alan Levy, my boss, now runs it. So Alan was, when I was a fellow, Alan was a young attending teaching that course. He eventually took it over.
Yeah.
Julius Goodman never had kids, never got married. When he had a GBM diagnosis, he didn't even get a biopsy. He knew what was going to happen. He lived his last 6 months or 8 months or 9 months, and he died, and he left behind an imprint that's forever because it's the Julius Goodman course. And now Alan Levy, cheers to Alan,
Dr.
boss.
Levy.
Amazing boss, best boss in the world. Him and Barth are built the best spine department as far as I see it. I'm biased. But I think there is some nobility in a monk-like life if you're going to do that. If
Yeah.
you're saying that I'm prepared to be a monk
Yeah.
of neurosurgery, a true acolyte, not in the current Star Wars Kathleen Kennedy way,
Yeah.
but the true acolyte, meaning you were put on this earth to help people. You're going to be the most perfectionist Jedi of that art form. I mean, that's not a horrible strategy.
Yeah. And some people are wired that way.
Yeah. Monks are wired a certain way. They're different.
Yeah. I think then there's one glaring omission that we haven't paid respect to, talking about sexual lust, talking about lust for your work, and that's power.
That's the most powerful one.
Right. And I think whether you admit it to yourself or not, anyone that wants to take other people, put them to sleep, and cut them open in such a way that they wake up afterwards definitely is attracted to power. And again, like anything, power can be used for good or evil. But the desire to exert influence and to be in control of a situation like that, I think, is another drive that captures people, right? And again, sometimes nobly, because the thought is, I know that I can do good. I know that if I'm in charge, I can ensure the right thing happens. But sometimes, just for the self-gratification of it all.
Mhm.
And I think that's like the self-gratification and the pleasure derived from surgery we talked about with gluttony, that addiction to the power trip of being in control of that situation and having someone else's life in your hands, that is a real temptation that's out there for any surgeon, especially in a position of prestige with junior partners, residents,
And financial gain.
and financial gain.
Yeah.
Right. how do you, I mean, again, like everything, you feel these temptations and you see people get captured by this mindless pursuit of power in the operating room, in the professional hierarchy, in our organizations, in our departments. People just keep climbing that ladder. How do you fight that impulse? Because you're well up the ladder yourself.
I don't fight it. I don't
right?
fight it. But I'll tell you, I want to take this on two fronts, and I think it's important because this really may be the elephant in the room. We've been sort of circling around lust, but lust for power, right? So I want to be, again, divulging. Can I divulge honestly here? So the past 5 years, I've been in a program, personal program, trying to initiate self-discovery. In that process, I've been interviewing, recruited to, looked at, entertained multiple chair positions as well as a dean position. And at the end of all this, after a 4-year journey, I've settled on the fact that that's not really my shtick. So in other words, I'm going to use another movie analogy, Top Gun Maverick, right? Captain, right? Which is pretty good in the Navy.
Yeah.
It's like a colonel in the Army, but you're not an admiral, right? So the perfectionist of the art, Achilles versus Agamemnon, right? That kind of analogy. And I've decided concertedly that my time, at least in the not organizational, but the structural elements of my job, are confined to being what I am. Full professor, spine director, whatever that is, right? Okay, so that's, I'm going to plateau there. Probably unlikely to, I'm not really interested in the other parts, although we'll see what happens. Who knows, the world could change a lot. And now I'm in a process of transition of power to my junior partners. And I don't mean junior in a weird way. I just mean they're younger than me. So Timur Yurkov, Ian Cote, Shelby Burks, Greg Basil, Michael Monterey, and Matthew Cumming, who were all personally selected by me and Alan Levy. This is an existential transition for me. So now I had the pleasure of having dinner with the CEOs or presidents or chairman of the board of the top 12 spine companies in the country in the past 3 months. And I'm transitioning power. I have to give up that lust for power. I'm only 53. You could say I could go another 20 years, 10 years, but the reality is, if I want to have any chance of surviving as a legacy, if I want to actually have the world be a better place, it's time. Doesn't mean I'm going to not be a surgeon and not do the podcast and do these things, but that's important. Like, I'm not saying I recognize it early enough. I think I recognize it too late. So when you're going through residency and you're going through this phase, or you're going through fellowship, or young attending, or mid-level, where you have all the power, these pieces of understanding how you are viewing your desires and your lust are important. I have not, don't get me wrong, I have not mastered this. I'm just trying to work my way through it. But you're right, the lust for power is more powerful than anything else.
Right, and it's interesting hearing you talk about handing the reins over in your department and meeting with these companies, because what is power? There's the experience of it, and there's the high that you get, and there's the primate social kind of experience where right? But what does that translate to in a scenario for a surgeon? It's one of the most universal things in surgery, especially for a trainee. It's getting your way, right? It's, no. Why are we doing it this way, Dr. Wang? Because that's the way I do it.
That's right.
Right? And so passing the reins over to that rogues gallery of badass spine surgeons who you've picked and many trained, what that means is you're not selecting people to do Mike Wang surgeries. You're selecting people that you trust to do good work.
That's right.
And there's many ways around a mountain, right? But as long as you get to the other side healthy and intact, take Shelby, for example. I'm sure he does things ways that you don't.
Totally different.
But patient wakes up, symptoms are better.
Doing great.
Right. And that is very not, that's hands off, that's not power, that's not my way, that's just a good way.
So your mentor is the best at this. Rick Fessler, a shout out to Rick. Rick has the most amazing collection of former fellows in the country, really, truly. I mean, he's at a different stage in life now, but I can name every Rick Fessler fellow because they're all great people. And so for the surgeons who are a little bit older, normally we talk to the young people, right? People who are my age in their 50s. Think about this. Legacy is important. The flip side of this is the loss of relevance, right? So loss of relevance is something to prepare for. Don't lose the cortisol because you'll die. But the loss of relevance is something we should all prepare for because, ashes to ashes, dust to dust.
Yeah.
Right?
And as I often do, speaking to the younger people, so many of these things that we're discussing, so many of these sins, it's easy to tell yourself, I'm young and hungry, I got a fire in my belly, and you can treat them as motivators, but just remember that there are things that can be tools, but they are not the end in themselves.
Right.
Right? And so if you seek power for power's sake, I think every wise person and every book in the history of our species will tell you that's not going to end well. But if you seek maybe not power, but influence and access and capability for what you can do with it, for your patients, for your family, for the things you care about, that's a very different enterprise. But the lust that draws you after something at the expense of everything that you should be working for and trying to build, that way lies peril.
Exactly. So what's next?
Next up, I know you've been waiting
Next
for
up,
it all
yes.
day. Sing Muse, The Rage of Achilles.
Oh,
Next.
I love it.
Anger and
Wrath.
patience.
Wrath, right?
Well, wrath
And anger, yes. Okay, yes.
And the corresponding virtue of patience.
Excellent.
He's been waiting all day for this.
I've been waiting for this.